It probably won't come as much of a shock for you to learn that I did not see and have no plans to see the film Anora, which apparently won Best Picture at the Oscars the other day. This is a film that was pretty low on my radar for obvious reasons, and if we're being honest, it was low on the Academy's radar too. In all likelihood, it was their backup plan, kind of their plan B for Best Picture after the lead actor in Emilia Perez summarily took that film out of consideration by bad-mouthing the patron saint of violent, drug-addicted felons who assault women and try to rob convenience stores. After that whole debacle, the Academy presumably had to spend a few days looking through the old tweets of everybody in the cast of Anora just to make sure that they, too, didn't make the mistake of besmirching the good name of St. George Floyd. And then when the background check came back clear, they decided to just go with that. So if you're not familiar with Anora, because like everyone else in the country, you've never seen it, here's the synopsis. It's a tragic comedy about a prostitute, or sex worker, as the euphemism goes, who's hired by the son of a Russian oligarch who lives in a waterfront mansion. And then after they party for a while and do other things, I suppose, they elope. And there's a lot of scenes along the way that can be fairly described as pornographic in nature, as you might imagine. In fact, that's most of the film. And then, spoiler alert, the marriage doesn't end well. Somehow the sudden union of a prostitute with the son of a Russian oligarch wasn't meant to be. Doesn't work out great. So Anora is cast aside, to her great shock and dismay. And then there's some drama with some Armenian henchmen who kidnap the prostitute and tie her up and gag her and offer her $10,000 to annul the marriage, which is only natural in a situation like this. I mean, who among us hasn't been kidnapped by Armenian henchmen after our impromptu marriages with the sons of Russian oligarchs goes south? Relatable stuff we're talking about. And then it gets even more relatable when one of the Armenian thugs develops some affection for the prostitute, and the film ends with her trying to have sex with him, but then she changes her mind and begins crying because, of course, affection is difficult under those circumstances. Circumstances that are rather emotionally fraught, and sort of that's the end. So for the record, if there are any inaccuracies in my synopsis that I just recited, you should know that, very honestly, I don't care. This film is one of the lowest grossing Best Picture winners in the history of the Oscars, so the odds are pretty low that anyone's going to call me out on it because no one's seen it, even if I'm wrong about something. The larger point is that at the Oscars, this film became a rallying cry for prostitutes. Actors and actresses, along with many others who are associated with this film, went out of their way to make this point as explicit as possible. Here, for example, is the star of the film, Mikey Madison, explaining that she wants to, quote, honor the sex worker community. Watch.
Also, thank you to Kennedy Schneider. Thank you to our incredible consultants. I also just want to, again, recognize and honor the sex worker community. I will continue to support and be an ally. All of the incredible people, the women that I've had the privilege of meeting from that community has been one of the highlights of this entire incredible experience.
Big cheer for prostitutes there. So she begins by praising the incredible consultants involved in the film, and then she expresses her affection for the so-called sex worker community as if they're two distinct categories. Apparently, in this one moment, we're meant to assume that consultants are morally distinct in some way from prostitutes. Personally, I don't know what's worse, to be a prostitute or a consultant, or a prostitute consultant. That combines two of the most disreputable professions into one. And then we're supposed to conclude that it's important to be a, quote, ally of the sex worker community, which is a statement that's so demented that you'd probably be embarrassed to even joke about it in private. But at the Oscars, which were broadcast to literally hundreds of viewers, it was an applause line. Yes, the message from this year's Academy Awards is that we're supposed to be allies to prostitutes. We're supposed to watch about 2 hours of softcore pornography, which is the film, and conclude that we're on the prostitute's side. That's supposed to be the brave stand that we take after watching this film. That's the grand message they wanted to communicate to make us all enlightened. Of course, every pathetic, sex-starved, lonely man on the planet is more than happy to demonstrate his allyship to hookers, and those men don't need a film to make them think that way. But just in case they need it, Anora is currently available to rent on the internet for about $5. And things somehow get even creepier when you realize that the director of this film, Sean Baker, has pretty much spent his entire career making films about prostitutes. He's directed at least 5 films about prostitutes by my count. And when he's asked about this, he said that his goal is to legalize prostitution for reasons that he wasn't exactly clear about, but that's his goal.
I've been pretty outspoken about my stance on sex work. It's our oldest profession, yet it has an incredible unfair stigma applied to it. And what I've been trying to do with my films is sort of chip away at that very unfair stigma. Personally, I think it should be decriminalized, and I guess through my work, through hopefully humanizing my characters that are usually seen as perhaps caricatures in most film and television, it will help do that.
This is a guy who just won 4 Oscars for this film. He won for the original screenplay, film editing, directing, and Best Picture, all for a single film about how important it is to legalize prostitution. If you're keeping track, that sets a record for most Oscars won by a single person for one film. Walt Disney didn't even do that. Walt Disney apparently won 4 Oscars in one night, but not for the same movie. So this is how the Academy is making history. They couldn't give the Best Actress award to a man because that man was not a fan of George Floyd. So instead of doing that, they'll shower the porno film with awards instead. Now, you'll see various conservative commentators online defending Anora and saying that it's actually critical of prostitution. And they'll point to the fact that in the film, the prostitute is obviously broken and unhappy by the end of it. And that may be true if Wikipedia's synopsis is to be believed. But the actual point of the film, according to the people who made it, who I think are probably authorities on the subject, is that we need to sympathize more with these prostitutes and legalize what they're doing. I mean, that is their motivation. And in that light, it's clear that Anora isn't really a film so much as part of a broader campaign to normalize and celebrate prostitution. It's not really a movie that's supposed to impress you with its plot or characters or anything like that. It's a political statement. In fact, it's as explicit a political statement as it could possibly be. The problem is that the leftists who campaign to humanize sex workers, as we heard from Mikey Madison use those words, when they say that, they have it only half right. Yes, we should humanize them. I mean, they are human beings, and their human dignity should be respected. But the way we humanize and ultimately help quote-unquote sex workers is to condemn, prohibit, and abolish quote-unquote sex work. You cannot legitimize prostitution while at the same time trying to be an ally to prostitutes. The way to be an ally, to help them, is to delegitimize prostitution and to drive it out of polite society and as far back onto the fringes as we can possibly get it. You hear this slogan, sex work is real work, all the time, and that is a slogan that you champion if you're trying to convince women to remain prostitutes forever. You know, it's like saying that a drug habit is a habit just as legitimate as the habit of gardening or stamp collecting. When you say that, you're not helping alcoholics. You're abandoning them. You are consigning them to a life of misery and failure. The people who made Anora wouldn't win an Oscar with that kind of message, of course, but it's obviously the right one, which is why no one bothered to see this film in the first place, and that is why Anora is today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.